We're joined tonight by author Michael Malone. First, he's going to read an excerpt from his newest novel. Or, sorry, that's not his newest novel. His first novel, Blood Tears.
Okay, I'll read a wee bit from the prologue. He closed the door, his hand trembling. Walking across the floor towards the desk, he removed all of his clothes. He bent to retrieve the black costume from the floor, draped it on a perfumed hanger, and hung it neatly in its place. His shoes were last, ladies' size 7. Black leather with a sensible heel, they were tucked under the chair. He massaged his toes, which had been stuffed into the neat fit. Blood stained one toe where the nail from the neighbouring pinky had torn flesh. He sat before the mirror and, filling his lungs, flicked a switch. Lights framing the mirror blazed unkindly onto his face. He breathed again and closed his eyes. And again he breathed, revelling in the speed of his pulse. So this is what it means to be alive, he thought. Every nerve in his body thrummed with electricity. This is what it means to belong. Muscles along his shoulders and down through his arms and legs relaxed, as if bathed in liquid and heat. Had his eyes been open, he would have seen the slow spread of a smile stretch his lips. It had begun. An eye for an eye, the Bible said, a life for a life. But how many lives were enough, he considered, to replace the one lost? As many as it takes. He slid open the long middle drawer under the desktop and pulled out 2 items, a white, featureless mask and a scalpel. He placed the mask over his face and regarded the eyes that looked back. They were brown and framed in long black lashes that were the envy of any woman who saw them. But within them lay layers he could only guess at. The mask brought into play a distance between him and his actions. The mask could feel while he could not. The mask could reason while he dare not. The mask could mourn while he should not. With long fingers he picked up the scalpel and aimed the point towards the mask. While one hand held the mask carefully in place, the other pressed finely honed steel against the lower right eyelid, until blood welled onto the blade. Then, after placing the knife on the desktop, his right hand pressed the cheek of the mask so that blood slid onto its surface. As a single drop of blood glided down the white cheek of the mask, he considered the long dead, the newly deceased, and those yet to die, and he enjoyed the tear.
Thank you very much for that. So that sort of leads into my first question. Religion and religious imagery features a lot in a lot of your writing, so I'm just wondering where that stems from.
From a misspent youth. No, I spent a portion of my childhood in a Catholic orphanage. So a lot of that fed into this novel. There was a bit of catharsis going on with the writing of it.
And also, all of your work that I've read takes place in Scotland. And so how important is it for you to include Scotland in your writing?
I think it's kind of natural for me. It's where I'm from. I've never really travelled much out with of it. I don't know anywhere else in the same degree. So I think a sense of place is vitally important in a piece of fiction, because that grounds the reader in the story. So it helps if you know what you're writing about from that sense.
Exactly.
So I guess that's why.
It's the whole adage, write what you know.
Yeah, well, if you somebody asked me this at a writers' conference last week and said, "Is that good advice to write what you know?" And I said, "Well, I've never murdered anyone, and I've written about that. So there are certain things you can imagine or research, but if you know something well, it will feed into your writing."
Exactly. Also, the character in your novels, Ray McBain, is he inspired by anyone you know?
No, not at all. He completely popped into my head and sort of came through my fingertips onto the keyboard, fully formed. I gave no thought to him, no planning. He just appeared on the page, as it were.
Very nice.
Just purely by instinct, yeah.
So all the characters in both Blood Tears and A Taste for Malice, they are very developed. So I was just wondering, you just said that McBain just kind of popped into your head. But how long did it actually take you to develop the other characters in that book?
Just again, everything I write is by instinct. I don't plan. I don't sit and work anything out. It's just purely everything. I just go into that space, start writing, and hope that good stuff comes out. So that's really what I do.
That's good. So, just a little bit about your background. Did you have any formal training in creative writing, or is it just something that you've always done?
No, it's I kind of taught myself actually. Went to a few workshops and sort of stuff like that. Went to writers' classes, read lots of books on the subject. In fact, at one point, I came across a bit of advice that says the best way to learn something is to teach it. So having written half of a novel, I approached a place up in Cumnock actually and said I could run a writing class for you. So it was basically it was a 10-week writing class, and I was a 1 week ahead of the students. So that's how basically I learned so much by doing that. I just picked up a couple of good books on the subject and then set up a class. And as I say, for each week I had a subject, I had to research and draw up the lesson for the following week. And a lot of that stuff stuck.
Nice. Who are your top favourite authors?
I've just finished James Lee Burke's latest book. He's an American crime writer. I was talking about Sense of Place earlier, and no one does Sense of Place as well as he does. It's just phenomenal. Just beautiful, beautiful writing. And he has these, the contrast of these really sick, evil characters, which really I enjoy. I love Stephen King. I think he's a fantastic storyteller. Who else? I like Denise Mina, one of our own Scottish authors. She's a fabulous writer as well. Yeah, I could go on and on, actually.
And do you have any tips for overcoming writer's block?
I don't think writer's block's a real thing, actually. I think it's an excuse. I think there's some famous writer said that anyone who has a mortgage will never have writer's block because you just have to work your way through it. I think sometimes you can get stuck. When I'm in the middle of a book, I come to the bit where I call it the muddle in the middle. Because I write by instinct, I don't have a plan. So I get to a point where I've put all the pieces on the board and I think, what on earth am I going to do with them? So that sometimes happens, but then you just go away, distract yourself, go for a walk, and then you find that the boys in the boiler room, as Stephen King talks about your subconscious, they'll pop out some sort of suggestions into your conscious mind, and away you go.
It's funny you mentioned Stephen King. He puts a sort of target each day. He has to write 5,000 words. Do you have anything like that?
No, I don't. I'm a bit of a binge writer. I can go for months without writing anything, and then I'll spend the next 3 months doing nothing else. But obviously I've got a day job, so that kind of curtails my writing somewhat, because the bills have to get paid, sadly. But yeah, it's just like that. Just kind of, as I say, have a wee binge at it, and then I'll produce a book.
There was a funny thing that I read as well about when you started writing poetry. You were a resident poet in some shop. Is that right?
An adult gift shop.
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say it myself just in case it wasn't true.
Yeah. Well, it lasted for about 2 weeks, I think. It was... I was a woman that used to come along to some of my poetry readings, and she was a teacher, and she was fed up with teaching, and as you do, she decided to open up an adult gift shop. So the idea was that I would write some sensual, erotic poems, and she would put them in nice wee frames and hang them in the shop beside the toys, shall we say. I liked where she was coming from, actually. It was more this kind of... I know in Britain we're very sort of laughing up your sleeve, that kind of thing. But she was trying to sort of suggest that the brain is the biggest sex organ, and we should perhaps give that a wee tickle instead of the other body parts.
And also, just on a completely separate subject, your only nonfiction work, Carnegie's Call, it's quite different. You're really prolific, seeing as you do poetry, creative writing, and nonfiction as well. So, what sort of inspired you to write about successful Scots?
But that was I was at a conference up in Glasgow by a guy called Jack Black, and he's a motivational speaker, and he had been talking about Andrew Carnegie and how he was influential in the writing of a book called Think and Grow Rich. He set this guy Napoleon Hill on a challenge, said to him, "Look, I want you to interview 500 of the most successful Americans, distill what you learn into a book." And that's what he did. And it took him 25 years to write the book. So it was published in about 1950-ish, and it's still in print. It sold 30 million copies. So as I was driving home from that, I thought, wouldn't it be great to have a Scottish version? But obviously I wanted to do something a wee bit different. And there is this thing that as Scots, we kind of hide our bushel, all that kind of stuff. We're not very good at sort of coming out and saying, "Look at me, I'm great." And there is actually that whole kind of Scottish cringe thing. You know, Wikipedia actually has a page devoted to the Scottish cringe, which is nuts. So I wanted to challenge that mindset and say, hey, let's acknowledge that we have done some amazing stuff in the past and look to see what we can do in the future.
Sounds good. And just lastly as well, speaking of successful Scottish people, what advice would you give to budding creative writers?
How long have you got? I think Stephen King summed it up quite neatly, actually. He said in his book called On Writing, read a lot and write a lot. And basically that's it. I come across quite a lot of writers that say they don't read, they never read anything, which I just can't understand. And I think you learn so much from reading, especially stuff that's out now, because you're writing now. You're wanting your stuff out into the market now, so you have to know what's successful, what's working, how other authors do it. And you learn by osmosis, just by the simple act of reading. And writing, you need to write a lot, you need to practice, work until you get your own voice, all that kind of stuff. And just persistence, that's been the big lesson for me, because I started in about mid-90s. The book Blood Tears was finished in about 2004, and it took until 2012 for that to be published. So that was knocking on a lot of doors. There was a few, how should we call them, duvet days when the book was rejected by publishers. And it was a real roller coaster ride of an experience. But you just have to pick yourself up, dust yourself down and keep going and believe in yourself.
Sounds good. Good advice from Michael Malone. Thank you very much for letting me interview you today.
Thank you for talking to me.